The Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. I am trying to configure my light, and I think I might just sacrifice it. No, it's staying sturdy. It might fall. I think it's time for some official equipment. Y'all, I've been going live since June of 2025, and I took about a 2-week hiatus, end of July into early August, and I'm back into the rhythm of going live every day. And over that span of time, over the last few weeks, I really forgot why I'm doing this. And I really lost sight of remembering and kind of bringing to, it's not even just remembering intellectually, it's remembering on an emotional level. On the Knowing Show, we talk about each intelligence, our intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, physical and spiritual intelligences. So when we are living aligned and really kind of full of passion and wholehearted, we're actually being able, it's a reflection of us being able to tap into each one of these intelligences and having each intelligence kind of serve as data, serve as fuel in our gas tank that allows for us to live a wholehearted life. And so as we're talking about this conversation this morning, which I'm so excited for, this topic came to me based off of what we're actually going to read today, but this conversation around how to stay in love no matter what. Part of that actually has to do with this just kind of note around remembering our why and remembering the truth. So much of the reason why we start moving out of alignment is because we're forgetting and we're not having our mission, our why, our kind of the reality and the truth of who we are and where we're going in full view. When I talk about alignment, it is the concept, it's a principle, and then we'll talk about the practice, but the principle is having my mind, body, soul, spirit, my behavior, my actions, my mindset, every part of me coming, kind of like taking all the disparate pieces and bringing it into alignment under the hierarchy of who do I want to be? Who do I feel called to be? And then at the very pinnacle of that is, well, who was I created to be? Because the reality is that I actually could very well have an ideal for my life and dream up something big. But if I'm not keeping into the forefront, what is my nature versus just how was I nurtured to be, then most likely nurture is going to have a louder voice. And nurture is what everyone else's opinion is when they raised us and their preferences and their biases and their subjective opinions about the world. And so our nurture, if we're lucky, was wholesome and helpful and raised us in a beautiful way. Yet a lot of times we live according to the opinions of others, where they're the ones that helped set our vision for our life. They're the ones that helped kind of guide us in terms of what to believe. And our behavior today as adults reflect the beliefs of our childhood, rather than us actually returning to this question of, well, what do I personally believe in, taking responsibility for our life and for our beliefs that are the nucleus that then drive outward and impact our behavior and impact our thoughts and impact our words. Every single decision we make, if you were to kind of peel the onion back, you look at the external decisions, but as you go closer and closer and closer into the core why of that decision, it comes down intrinsically to our beliefs. And so this conversation of, well, how do we stay in love no matter what? Love and kind of looking at that nucleus of that core belief is what we're examining today, even though it's important to recognize that so often we can actually get an indication of our belief system based on the decisions and the behaviors of our lives. So if we want to know what we believe, we can kind of go about it from the outside looking in, but we can also do the work to go inside and then look out from that perspective. So we're talking today about how to stay in love no matter what. And I want to start off with reading something that I'm actually pretty excited about. We have been reading through A Course in Miracles every single day over the last year, missed a couple days, but we're going to read through this. Before I do, I just want to jump here in the chat on YouTube. Cole, thanks for joining. I'm glad you're here. Max, good to see you. He says, where are you from? I grew up in Maryland, actually, in the States. So we typically have folks kind of joining us from all over the world. And so I I guess I represent the United States. Mike, thanks for joining. Good to see you. Magic, good morning. Will Bonkers, hello. Love with someone else or ourselves or God. I love that you asked that. I was wondering if somebody would, because the title is kind of elusive. So for those of you who are joining in on other platforms on YouTube, Will Bonkers says, in terms of our title, which is all about love, how to stay in love, he says, is it love with someone else, ourselves, or God? And so we're going to be diving into that today. Adam on Facebook, I'm so glad to see you. Good morning, my friend. Y'all, this conversation is so important because basically, if we were to assess our lives and look at on the scope of, okay, I obviously was born and raised in this year, and then the rest of my life and the trajectory looking ahead, when I look at the past, when I look at the present, and when I look at the future, what is it marked by? And love, which is the best and greatest of all things. If you read, if you guys haven't read this, I would really recommend reading Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote it in the German concentration camp. And I believe it was around 1942. I'm not sure the exact date he wrote the book. This book is kind of predicated in having the ability to get outside of what is going on in our present moment, to have kind of that ability to have a third party perspective, and to have the ability through love to actually transcend and kind of get outside and see the full perspective of our present moment. It's so easy to live subjective rather than being able to get that kind of third party view. So to this conversation, the reason why love matters so much is because it will dictate every single decision we make for the rest of our lives. And so to Will Bonker's point, love is the concept of love that we're talking about this morning, love with someone else, love for ourselves, or love for God. And so it's all of them. And I want to start off by reading our lesson for the day. Lesson 238, on my decision, all salvation rests. Father, your trust in me has been so great, I must be worthy. You created me and know me as I am, and yet you placed your son's salvation in my hands and let it rest on my decision. I must be beloved of you indeed, and I must be steadfast in holiness as well, that you would give your son to me in certainty that he is safe, who still is part of you and yet is mine because he is myself. And so again today, we pause to think how much our Father loves us and how dear his son, created by his love, remains to him, whose love is made complete in him. This concept in today's lesson, effectively, if God loves his son so much and we are to be called his son, then therefore we must be worthy. We must be of the utmost treasure. I grew up going to a classical school, and we learned Latin and Greek and debate, and one of our courses was logic. And it was so much, and it's a very black and white course, but it was all predicated on if this, then that. So if God values and cherishes and loves his son, and we are called his son, then therefore we must be so precious and worthy. And so from that basis of truth, we then operate and engage with the rest of the world around us. We engage with ourselves. And so if we look at this concept of the nucleus, assuming what we shared earlier to start off this show, that every single behavior is predicated in a belief, then this belief around love is so important for us to consider. Do I believe I am worthy? Do I believe I am loved? And then am I going to act accordingly? Because man, people who act according to a belief of love and the fact that they're worthy, you see it in kids who grow up in kind of a stable, healthy home. Man, they are confident. They can love anybody. They'll go up and look you in the eye. They're effervescent and full of life. They're full of curiosity. One of the conversations I had on the Knowing podcast, so this is the Knowing show, the Knowing podcast, I sat down across from people in person and did I think it was about 24 interviews over the course of 2 seasons. And I spoke with probably two of the most successful folks I've ever spoken to. You know, they have 9-figure businesses. And both of these individuals on separate occasions, I asked them, what is the number one quality that someone needs to cultivate? Not just for success, but for living. We talk about, what's the purpose of knowing? It's for the purpose of freedom. It's for the purpose of living a wholehearted life in accordance with who we were created to be, effectively living up to the fullest potential for you and me. And I asked, what's the number one quality? Both individuals, separate occasions, both with 9-figure businesses, said curiosity. Y'all, curiosity is a result of secure, confident worthiness, knowing that we are loved and we are safe. And so when we think about, well, why does love actually matter? Because in the nucleus of love, everything flows forth, or everything flows forth from the nucleus of fear. Usually it's love or fear, just to simplify it. You know, there's pride and ego and all of that. But if we really boil it down, we are either operating from the place that is life-giving, adding to our lives personally, and then adding to the lives of others, or we are operating from a place where we are detracting life from ourselves and from others. So when we ask this question of what is our core belief around love, well, we can get the best glimpse if we actually observe our behaviors, our decisions, and then going inward. So like peeling the onion back. Okay, well, what are our words? How do we talk about ourselves? How do we talk to others? And then go in further. What are our thoughts? What do we actually think about other people? What do we think about ourselves? What are the core narratives that just kind of occupy our mind? I want to jump here in the chat and just take a quick moment. Comic Flick Fusion, I'm so glad to see you. Thank you so much for joining. So grateful for you, my friend. IAMDT, good morning. Ravi Kant Campbell says, what's the purpose of life? That's a whole episode, isn't it? My gosh. We'll get back to that in just a moment. I just want to keep reading through the chats. Lord Angel, good morning. Jettison, good morning. Thanks for joining. Perry Guinness, good morning. Purpose of life is to live. I love that. Coats, McGoats, good morning. Will Bonkers. I will say, I think that this show, so Will says, is this spirituality or a type of Christianity? I want to say something that is so near and dear to me. It is so important to me that this show and my life, every part of what we're building here with Knowing, it all has to do around us cultivating a relationship rather than operating within the confines of a religion. And the same goes for that concept around spirituality translates into every single category. So emotionally, it's not just when we talk about, knowing our emotions. Well, it's not for the purpose of then letting them drive the ship. It's so that we know them and become familiar with them, but ultimately we're the ones in the driver's seat, not our feelings that have been unprocessed. So there's these caveats around each one of these categories of intelligences: the spiritual intelligence, the emotional intelligence, intellectual intelligence, physical intelligence. There's a lot of nuance. And so when it comes to spiritual intelligence, have we actually experienced the things that we believe? Or are we just espousing what was told to us? The Latin root of intuition is intuere, which means to be taught from within. And so that's the goal when we talk about spirituality. And you can, call it Christianity, you can call it something else. But the goal is that we are developing a relationship with God. And I do believe that Christ is actually a representation for you and me of how we can live and actually what is possible. So a lot of times, this is where I don't like calling it Christianity, because I actually have a lot of beliefs that veer off from Christianity. For example, a lot of churches and a lot of religious context puts us in this very weak position where we are nothing and we are worms and we're hopeless and we're destitute. Whereas I actually believe that God views us as redeemed and beautiful and full of prowess and encompassing the same power that his son, Christ, encompasses, which makes us of the highest worth and the highest value. And so I don't see that or hear that talked about often in that religious confined setting. Normally it's keep yourself on your knees rather than stand up tall, because man, we're free. We've got a mission and there's so much life to live. And we get to be literally the ambassadors and advocates. We are the reflection of God himself. And if I'm seeing somebody who's living weak and impoverished spiritually, I don't want anything to do with that. That's not the God I know. The God I know is one who is full of love and full of power and ready to make an impact and influence in the world. And so when we talk about what religion are we kind of adhering to on the show, it's so much more about, have we come to know the presence of God for ourselves? Because that's the goal, is that our spirit is awakened and alive, and we actually can, there's this concept of testing the spirits. I do believe that there's good and bad, and we get to experience both, and we get to choose which spirit am I going to live accordingly to. And so we get to choose that, but it's important that we actually come to awaken even just spiritual intelligence. The definition of emotional intelligence first is to be aware of, then to understand, then to control, then to convey one's own emotions. And then it's engaging with others with empathy and with wisdom. It's very similar when I think of what is spiritual intelligence, very similar to be aware. What is going on in my spirit? Do I actually listen? Do I get to see the world through the lens of our creator and thus allow me to become a creator myself? Or am I simply consuming? And is my spiritual connection just numb because I don't take the time to listen? I don't take the time to create. I don't take the time to cultivate and nurture that spirit. Just jumping back here in the chat, Image Elohim says, good morning, my friend. God's love for his children is a pre-enlightenment concept. As Spinoza wrote, he who loves God cannot strive that God should love him in return. If that's very interesting, I need to sit with that one. Urbano, good morning. Hello from Brazil. Oh, I'm so glad to see you. The Rock of Peter, hello from Scotland again. I'm so glad you're here. Brian J, good morning. Good to see you. Official Anu, hello. Masonic, hello. Good to see you. Biblical love is pre-enlightenment, closing around 100 AD. As Spinoza wrote in 1677, he who loves God cannot strive that God should love him in return. It's pure reception, never a transaction. It's never a transaction. That's so good. Lord Angel, I love this. God is with me, meaning trust in God's protection. Jazzy, good morning. The purpose of life is to love by willing the good of the other through sacrifice. No worship without sacrifice. That's so beautifully put. My gosh. Oh, wow. IAMDT says religion is to reconnect to the body in Latin. Why do we disconnect? Wow, I love that. I did not know that was what that meant. Religion is to reconnect to the body in Latin. Man, isn't it wild how distorted that has become? I never knew that that's the Latin root of what, or the Latin meaning of religion, to reconnect with the body. And yet it has turned into kind of the antithesis of that. Wow. That's so, so, so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Y'all, this is why I love the show. The comments here in the chat is so good. I always learn something new from this. This is so good. Y'all, I want to circle back just on this topic. I actually have a meeting in 10 minutes that I need to get to for work, and I need to shower after the gym. I want to touch on something, one last thing before we jump off for this morning. It's not popular. If we talk about how to remain in love, what are kind of the steps to remain in love? Well, first, being aware of what's going on inside of us. We already established that the emotional intelligence definition, that is the first step there. That also is a first step in spiritual intelligence. It's just being aware what is going on. What is the reality of my experience? We talked about this the other day on the show. So often we can sit in someone else's experience, view the world through their eyes. And it's not even just here in this present moment. in terms of like, I look at the world through my partner's eyes. You could actually still be looking at the world through your mother's eyes from when you were 6 years old, because we have yet to cultivate our own beliefs, our own awareness of spirituality, emotional health, and we're kind of living dormant of our own experience in the world because we're looking through the lens of someone else. But if we want to wake up, being aware, that's really the first step. And then when we think about how to remain in love, in addition to that, this one line from our reading today, and I must be steadfast in holiness as well, that you would give your son to me in certainty that he is safe, who is still part of you and yet is mine. Y'all, if we believe we are made in the image of the Creator, and if we believe we have a mission, and if we believe that God is love, well, then how do we embody that? How do we actually allow for us to live and breathe and be more like that? Holiness. And this is where it's like, what does that even mean? And it's not a popular topic at all. And I'm sure people have just dropped off. Y'all, holiness, keeping ourselves pure as it pertains to our inputs. If we think of our body, mind, soul, spirit as an operating system, just like in a business, you've got an operating system. And you're allowing for someone to work for you who steals from you, well, that's going to corrupt the operating system. If you have a hacker come in, that's going to corrupt the operating system. If you allow for even a bad employee, if you allow for a bad tech stack, if you allow for bad programs, bad platforms and technology to come in, your operating system is going to get corrupted at some point. What are the inputs feeding our mind, soul, body, spirit? And even like we talk about literally our physical body, what are we physically eating? Is it adding to or taking away? Every bite of food, every substance, every word, every TV show, every podcast, every song is either giving or taking from us. It's either adding to love or adding to fear, and thus taking away life. We were talking of what is our operating system? Is it one of love or is it one of fear? And based on our answer there, then we get to assess, okay, what are all of the inputs that I'm feeding? What am I feeding love? What am I feeding fear? And then what does it look like to maybe switch up some of those inputs? If we want to see change in our behavior, we need to see change in our belief. And the best and surest way to stay and not even just stay in love, maybe we actually need to get into love, but it's through the purity of our inputs to kind of do away with that which is corrupting our operating system. And sometimes it might mean a total detox. Last year, I went away for 2 weeks to Prince Edward Island in Canada. And I was just off my phone and off. I didn't listen to music. I didn't read books. I had zero inputs from 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. And I just, it didn't just feel like a detox. It felt like I had been addicted, and I was going through not just kind of like the detox, but like an actual additional layer of, okay, I'm getting unaddicted. I forget what the word is. I need to go shower. I've got 5 minutes before my meeting. Y'all, thank you so much for joining today. Lord Angel, thank you so much. Image Elohim, AMD, I'm so glad to see you. Goose Hunter, everything that is not popular has divine. Everything that is not popular, I think you're saying, has divinity in it. I don't know, drawing conclusions there. Y'all, thank you so much. I will see you tomorrow morning. Let me see if I have another show today. We don't have another show today. So I will see you tomorrow morning at 6:30 a.m. Pacific.